Good afternoon, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome. It's a work session of the Anchorage Assembly. Today is Friday, March 6th. It's 1:04 p.m. We're on the record till 2. We're here to discuss AO 2026-33, an ordinance repealing Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 1075, inspection fees, repealing and reenacting Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapters 2305, building regulations, 2310, Anchorage Administrative Code, 2315, International Building Code, 2320, International Mechanical Code, 2325, Uniform Plumbing Code, 2330, National Electrical Code, 2345, International Fire Code, 2360, International Energy Conservation Code, 2365, International Existing Building Code, 2375, ASME A17.1, Safety Code for Elevator and Escalators, 23.76, ASME A18.1, Safety Standard for Platform Lifts and Stairway Chairlifts, 23.85, International Residential Code, and 23.110, International Fuel Gas Code. We'll start with introductions. Ms. Baldwin-Day.
Aaron Baldwin-Day.
Jared Kirker.
Ann Court.
Daniel Volland.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant. On the phone, we also have Member Silvers.
Yarrow Silvers.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez.
Present, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick.
Here, thank you.
Thank you. Any other member on the phone? I don't hear anyone. We're also joined by Bob Dole.
Bob Dole, Director of Community Economic Development.
Greg Soule, Director of Development Services.
Daniel King, Engineering Services Manager for Development Services.
All right. So the undertaking that we have before us, this proposal, is a once every 6-year endeavor, which is to review and incorporate updates to the various building codes that are international into our code. And then the Assembly's role is to hear from the departments and consider any alterations from the national standards. And this is what we have before us, a pretty comprehensive 250-some page document. I hope it's posted on the website for work sessions. And this work session may be enough for us to get through the conversation, but it also could be just the beginning of the conversation that we need to have. I also understand that this item was heard yesterday at the CEDC committee meeting, and so this is not the first time it comes before the body. That's the predicate. Mr. Dole, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bob Dole, Director of Community Economic Development. As you know, every 6 years we return here. It's kind of like the locust coming back to revisit this. We have the benefit as we sit here today with you of lessons learned from the earthquake and also the process of the national code development in getting to this point in the 2021 and now the 2024 codes since the last time this body visited the building codes for this entity. As we talk about 10,000 homes in 10 years, to us, the key point is it's 10,000 responsibly built and safe homes. We also proved after the earthquake that a home that does not hold together is not an affordable home. We painfully proved that for many families with foreclosures and excessive or very high special assessments by condominium owner associations. So it's important for us as we go forward, we find that balance for affordability, both for what can be built now, but also the resiliency that it stays affordable for the owners in the future. These gentlemen will take you through the technical portions of a more in-depth dive. I'd like to, if there are no questions of me, I'll hand off to our building official.
I don't see any questions. Mr. Soule.
Thank you. As Bob stated, this is critical to ensure that our housing stock and commercial building stock remains resilient. This update will also bring us more in line nationally with what the industry standard is for code usage. This process has been a year in the making, and it was headed up by Daniel King to my right here. There was 10 different code committees involved, each one manned by a member of the building board. And since Daniel was really responsible for overseeing the process, I'm going to hand off to him for the presentation.
Welcome, Mr. King.
Daniel King, Development Services. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Bob. I've put together a presentation. We have in Exhibit B significant changes list. This is a presentation of significant changes. So there's There's some that I didn't put in here, and I'm happy to go over any of those with you as well. So this one's going to be the highlights of the significant changes that we put together. Originally, I had a time constraint of like 10 minutes to run through with CEDC, so it's nice to have a little more breathing room. A great job to Chair Constant on reading this out, because I would not want to read this again. This is a long list of codes. There's I think 11 actual chapters of the code that we updated through this process. Some of the committees were combined to do that. So we have our 9 technical committees that we engaged in fall of 2024. And as Greg was saying, we had a member of the building board on every committee, along with co-chairs for the municipality from development services. So we had either an inspector or a reviewer that co-chaired to help guide the conversations. So that was started in fall of 2024. We had our first official meetings for all of the committees in January of 2025 and continued through the summer. It was brought to the building board in November twice to go over all of the changes and discuss any significant changes at that meeting, and make any final adjustments that they thought were important for their approval. We also brought it to the tech board in January, and it was sent through legal as well to make sure that it was in good condition. We've also been working with the Alaska State Fire Marshal on one change in particular, and so that is still an ongoing process. The committee's goals for this was to educate the groups first and foremost, to make sure that everyone on the committees knew what they were trying to get to a resolution on. Any of the decisions that were made, we had to make sure that everyone knew what they were doing. The code that we're currently on is the 2018 cycle. There was an interim cycle, 2021, that we did not adopt, and now we're moving on to the 2024. And so that required updating everyone, not on just the changes from 2018 to 2024, but what happened in the middle. One of those would be an example of the occupied roofs. Occupied roofs was added in 2018 when everyone became really interested in having a rooftop party. In 2021, the code was updated to provide clarification on the number of stories and the height of the buildings when you're going to be using a roof as an occupied roof. And then there was a small change in 2024 to change it from calling it occupied to occupiable, because if your intent is to occupy it one day out of the year, then that's an occupiable roof, even if most of the time it's not occupied. It's important to note that this is why we had to go through this long process, was just to make sure that these things that are in blue that were adopted in 2021's version, we understand why it was added and if it makes sense for our jurisdiction to keep it. So that was a part of our discussion on local issues to construction and any proposed and updates to local amendments that we wanted for local conditions or constraints. One example that we have is for unvented room heaters. The base code that we use, the International Fuel Gas Code, in that code, they have a section for unvented room heaters, and we have historically amended that section out. We don't want you to use an unvented. All of the room heaters should be vented when it comes to a fuel gas heater. When we have to use it for 6 months out of the year, the chances of it having an issue go up. And so when they're unvented, the risk to life is too high. And that's what we decided a long time ago. So we've historically amended this section out. So that's an example of a local constraint that you may not have in a place like Florida, where you're not worried about heating a room at night. We have a note on our building safety service area. I'm sure all of you are very aware that there is Anchorage at large, and then there is the building safety service area. Title 23 is the building codes for all of Anchorage, but the exception is that you don't have to get a building permit, plan review, or inspections when you're outside of the building safety service area. It is an option. So if someone wanted to have our inspectors go do something on a project, then you can elect to do that and get a full building permit, but it's not required. But all of the codes technically do apply everywhere throughout Anchorage.
Mr. King, just a question for you, Ms. Bryant.
Yeah, thanks. Just in your experience, is that common for folks to voluntarily opt in, or is it really kind of a, I have to do it or I don't have to do it?
It's very often, I have to do it or I don't have to do it. What happens is we've had people come in later and say, has the city inspected this? And we say, no, we haven't inspected it. And so there's turmoil on that can happen because they expect that the city's doing it and it's not happening.
Interesting. Just kind of a question, probably more for Bob. This BSSA and inspections, I wonder if there's any mechanics for us to record onto a property that it doesn't have an inspection, or that it's, so that the buyer actually knows what they're getting.
Through the chair, the BSSA reflects generally where the inspections are mandatory. It is few and far between outside of the BSSA that the
No, I get that.
inspections are done. We'd have to come up.
Slightly different question.
I think though, with updating the permit system, there should be a means to show outside the BSSA if somebody opts into the inspections.
Or maybe some kind of required notification.
You're thinking real estate.
Yeah, maybe it's a required notification. Okay, we'll talk more about it later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair on that point, yes. That is often when it happens is on real estate transactions where people find out after that it was never inspected by us, when they had expected that it would have been.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking on the other end, like, how could we generate that so people would know up front? Mr. Gates, it's a distraction from our topic. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I had an understanding that although outside the BSSA, we don't require the municipal inspections and code enforcement for building codes, that there is still an applicable, I guess, state fire marshal plan review and inspections for commercial buildings, but not small residential structures. There's sort of a line there. So there still are for the commercial buildings built outside some, I guess, code plan review and inspection. Is that right?
Yes, so there's some state fire marshal review that will occur. You'll still have to get a state permit outside of the BSSA. It does not apply to residential permits. They don't look at anything triplex and under, so they'll only look at a fourplex and up. And then I believe there is a price limit on inspections. They only happen at $1 million or more. Is that right? It might be $1 million or more that they'll actually bring in the inspection services.
All right, thanks. I'll think more on that.
So this was actually great fodder for our BSSA was great fodder for research that was done out of the University of Colorado Boulder and the University of Notre Dame. Two researchers were really interested after the 2018 earthquake in our BSSA, and we have an arbitrary line on the hillside of regulation and non-regulation. Part of that arbitrariness is that before these areas were developed, it was the simplest just to draw a straight line. And now those areas that we thought were never going to get developed are getting developed. And so we have this nice straight line on the hillside. And so what they did is take all of the residential projects between 2018 and 2023 along this hillside line within a mile, within a half mile and mile is what they had as their limits. And then they also took in that same period a single builder in Anchorage that did stuff inside the BSSA and outside, just to see stuff in Eagle River, stuff in Girdwood if they were doing that, or other places in Anchorage, and compared the two. What they found is the cost per square foot on these homes was not significantly different. They were effectively the same price that you would be paying for these houses. But they did see that there was going to be more complex construction within the BSSA, more roof lines, more shapes. Very often you'll have a box as well outside of the BSSA, but we found that there were going to be more re-entrant corners inside the BSSA, so you can get L's or U's or different other shapes that would be coming out. And all of that they posit is because there is a higher degree of confidence in the municipal review process, that engineers feel more confident in the design because it has to go through some sort of review, and they have a better design plan, whereas outside it's all on their own liability, so it's easier to do a box.
Square foot cost.
Yes, with the square foot cost end up being the same, which we thought was an interesting process. They're still working on this. I would recommend that maybe at CEDC that we have a presentation by the reviewers or the researchers. They did a great presentation to the Geotech Advisory Commission, and so I'm sure they'd be interested in presenting to you all as well. Another note on not the building safety service area, but the building codes. I meant to mention our current ISO rating, our insurance rating. We just got it recompleted. We are now at a 5. The closer to 1, the better. We were at a 3. And this time they gave us a 5. And it's because the biggest reason is because we didn't adopt the 2021 codes. When we go in and adopt the 2024, they will we'll represent it to them and they'll readjust us to a 3 again. So the insurance rating will improve. All right. Yeah.
Ms. Baldwin.
So to clarify, this is insurance ratings for property insurance that homeowners are purchasing. Is that correct?
Correct. The ISO puts out an insurance rating, and then insurers will use that to determine what the rate should be for what you pay.
Through the chair, Ms. Baldwin, it's residential and commercial. So it applies to both.
Thank you for anticipating my follow-up question. And ISO stands for?
I think it's Insurance Services Organization.
Yes.
I have to look it up every time. So. Great. So yes, we'll go over just the highlights. There's more in Exhibit B if you're interested in some of the smaller technical items, but we can go over those after. First significant change is to our admin code. For building permit exemptions, we've historically had a value in there for non-structural modifications to the exterior of your house or interior, being drywall, siding, or roofing repairs that you may have to make. If it's under $5,000, you don't need to get a permit. It has been that way since the year 2000. And so our proposal was to increase it based on the inflation that's occurred between 2003 and 2025. So that came out to about $10,000. It was actually timely that we decided to look at this as well. Someone called in just the other day saying that they thought the $5,000 should be increased. And I said, well, we are addressing that right now. So it was nice that we were able to anticipate that.
You can't even get the inspection for 5,000 anymore on the certain buildings.
Correct. And that was part of our intent, was for roof repairs. If you have a small repair that you need to do, it will probably be at least $5,000. And we don't want to hold you up with a permit to fix a piece of your roof.
So there was a little bit of conversation at CEDC on this topic with respect to tying the limit on non-structural repair to a dollar amount versus a class of repairs. Can you say a little bit more about that and just sort of the rationale for choosing a dollar figure versus this class of repairs is no permit is required versus this class of repairs you do need a permit?
Yes. The repairs are limited to non-structural repairs with the intention of decreasing the risk. It also goes to non-firewall repairs to decrease the risk. Part of keeping it at a price point, the intention is the larger the project gets, the more likely it is that it's going to be more than just drywall repairs. The more likely it's going to be more than just sheathing repairs on the exterior of your house or siding repairs on the side of your house. And it allows us to help capture that. If you're going to spend more than $10,000 and replace a lot of drywall, there's a chance that you end up affecting something else, right? You end up saying, oh, well, since I have the wall open, I'm going to replace an electrical outlet, move it over here or over there. That would be a separate permit that we do want to capture. And so it's mostly to capture things like that, that are incidental at the time you start your project. But when you get into the project and you're ripping into a lot of stuff, you may end up tacking on more and more and more. And this is a way for us to be able to capture that, to say, hey, if it's over 10,000, please get a permit. And then while we're out there, we say, oh, it looks like you've moved all of your outlets. And you say, oh yeah, I thought it was fine while the wall's open. It's trying to limit that risk associated with the work that someone may be doing unintentionally.
If I could, through the chair, Ms. Baldwin, sheathing, I think, is a really good illustrative example. The sheathing is like the substrate below your siding, if you will. So a lot of times, that's critical for the shear resistance in the overall structural functionality of the building. whereas the siding might not be. So, if someone's replacing the siding, we don't necessarily need a permit for that. But if they do start tearing into the sheathing, it's pretty likely that it'll go over that $10,000 mark. So that is a structural component, if that illustrates it a little bit better.
I'm tracking. Yeah, it's the if you give a moose a muffin principle that happens when home repairs go on. Yeah, I'm tracking. Thank you.
Continuing on, our next significant change in the admin code is for mobile food units and shelter units located in allowed camps. The language in the administrative code was saying that they would not need to get a building permit or a certificate of occupancy, provided they followed the restrictions in this section. And then it's complicated by the fact that one of the restrictions is you have to get an electrical permit, which is a building permit. We recognize the intent of the assembly and the language is to limit the inspections and review that gets done. So we don't have as much inspection or review on the building itself, but the electrical still needs to be reviewed. And so that is a building permit that you get. The language that we propose is to say that you will get a building permit, but you will be exempt from building plan review and building inspections, except as required by this section. We've had confusion from people when they come in and they say, hey, we're going to get our electrical permit. And they don't realize that they'll still need to provide zoning's approval, get zoning's approval. This is now a land use permit with an electrical permit combined. And so they think that they're completely clear of land use. Land use zoning needs to approve where it's going to go. Traffic needs to be able to approve where it's going to go to make sure that they have the right ingress and egress path. And none of that's been removed by this section being added. So this helps clarify that they will get a building permit. Other things will still apply, but by following these guidelines, they'll be limited in the amount of review and inspection that they get in field.
Ms. Bradley.
Thanks. So we talked about this briefly yesterday in CEDC, and then we had a conversation afterwards. I am interested in, and I know you'll get to this later, you talked about kind of what do changes look like if there's a new version, et cetera. I'm interested in changing this mobile food units piece to broaden beyond just food and say vending units. And the example I gave yesterday was a hat store. I can imagine probably it's more likely to have a coffee shop than a drive-through hat store, right? But I think, I was thinking of like a Connex that has ski waxing services, right? There's a bunch of different things that I can imagine would happen in here. And I think because this is about the structure and it's not about health code or things like that, I think there is a valid argument to make that any kind of vending, it doesn't matter what you're selling, could fit into this as long as it's the same kind of building. So just wanted to put that on the record as something that I'd like to pursue as an amendment, but also open to including it in a larger S version. And again, I support this, just thinking beyond just food units. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, may I jump in for a moment? Historically, this has been an area of user dissatisfaction with the permit process, not realizing those other permits were required. So this is a means to set expectations on the front end. Augmenting this will be, we envision rolling out some lunch and learns, probably virtual during the year. One will be focused on these coffee cart or other food unit operators and providing another just Q&A session for them. But this is addressing a long-term point of confusion for people walking into the permit center.
So does this change in language change anything about the fees or any of the steps that are currently required for mobile food unit folks?
This does not change any of the steps that are required. It does help clarify what the steps are. That was the intent of this. We wanted to keep the intent of the assembly on what they want out of this, but also clarify to the public. It was confusing when the shelter units ordinance went through and someone was first presenting it to us. They came in with just the electrical contractor came in with their electrical plan, and I was explaining to him everything that they needed to provide for zoning's approval, and he didn't know what to do with it. So I had to end up working with the Central Lutheran Church to just figure out what they needed to provide, and that we also put together a handout to the public. It's on our website now to help people if more people want to do this process.
Is this, will this be something once we have will this be something that is made more explicit and more visible for folks once we have an online, like a digital portal? Will there be sort of a, if you are a this, then you do this kind of public facing checklist that allows folks to track what they need for a mobile food unit, for example?
The goal of the new software will be to make it a little more prescriptive for people when they apply online. So the intent is that it will be offering those slots for you to fill in of the attachments that you need for your first submittal. Currently, with our process, we will issue you the ability to upload all of the stuff that you need, and it is on you to know what those things are in a way. And so we will usually provide comments when you do your first submittal of you're missing this, or you didn't provide that. This will hopefully be a clarification for the public when they do get their approval to submit. It will include all of the specific items that need to be included to get it on our radar.
Thank you.
And to Member Brawley, I'm happy to work with you on your proposed amendment. We will be doing an S version of our own on a later significant change with the state once we have their approval and modifications. So if there are any changes that you are interested in or any other members are interested in, we're happy to put together that S version for a combined single S version.
Thanks. And I'd say, yeah, get those ideas on the table for members.
I would add a caveat to what Mr. King just said, if they agree. Yeah, so amendments can also come outside of the S version, but yeah, narrow that just a little bit.
Correct. With our advice, we'd love to provide guidance. Thank you. Continuing on, our last admin significant change is going to be our fee tables. We made a number of updates to our fee tables. One of the significant ones being adding a limit to the number of inspections included on commercial projects. We've had for a long time the limit to the residential permits inspections. And that is to say that a residential project typically will take around 23 or so inspections to be completed. And if you have to go over that amount, then you will usually pay for them on a case-by-case basis, individual inspections. But on a commercial project, whether it is a $10,000 commercial project or $100 million commercial project, you get the same number of inspections, which is infinite. And this is going to put a cap on that. What we did is we took all of the inspections that were required to complete a project between 2020 and 2024, and we fitted it to a certain number of inspections to get completed. For most projects, you'll be able to get it completed under the limit. And then if you go over that, you will pay on an inspection by inspection basis. Doing this, putting the specific number on, we find that 1% of permits will go over when they cost $1 million or less. So almost no one is going to have to pay extra at the end of their project. And 8% between 1 million and 5 million will go over. What we were able to do along with providing this is increase the number of inspections that residential permits will get. So a residential project used to give you 23 up to 500,000, and then you would get 2 more inspections every 100,000. We've moved that down now so that you get 23 at the start of your project, and you'll get 2 more for every 100,000. You'll see on the second graph, there's a whole section between the green line and the orange line that will now have their permit fully paid for at their first time coming in. As far as inspections is concerned, so that you don't have at the end of your permit when you're trying to close out this surprise fee that you didn't realize you were going to have to pay. It is reducing the residential permits from going over by 15 percentage points. Another thing that we were able to add by adding this limitation on commercial inspections was doubling the number of inspections that we can offer on retros. So a lot of times a retrofit permit is for replacing a water heater, replacing a boiler in a house. You can get that done, or extending an electrical outlet to another location. You can get those things done under a retro permit. and you pay per inspection. Sometimes you get one inspection and there's corrections. Well, what happens is then we charge for a second inspection that goes from $175 for the permit to $350 for the permit. And then either that's going to be paid by the contractor or that's going to be paid by the homeowner. To help people do these projects and not have surprise fees waiting for them at the other end, now all retro permits, or almost every single type of retro permit that you can get, is going to have 2 inspections included. That way, if there are corrections that need to be made, that's understandable. That'll happen. We will come back out a second time and look at it after the contractor fixes it for no cost. I think it's a very good benefit that we can provide to the community, and it's only possible by making these other adjustments to how we handle our inspections.
If I could also add, through the chair, this will also help us close more of these permits, because a lot of times when people learn that they have to pay for additional inspections to close these permits, they just won't call them in, and these permits remain open, and we have this backlog of open permits. So we're hoping by not having the 15% reduction in residential permits going over and the additional inspection for retros, it'll just go a long way to helping us close permits and not have so many open ones all the time.
Our next significant change moves us into the International Building Code. This was the biggest significant change for the building code by far. Single exit buildings has been a popular conversation nationally. When I went to the code conference hearings on updating all of the codes for the 2027 code cycle, this was a long discussion, a long conversation, and it's really difficult at the national level to be able to put something in place that makes sense for the nation. But there are locations like Seattle, New York, and Hawaii that have put in local amendments that make sense for their individual jurisdictions for the support that their fire department and building department can provide. So this is under that, guys, that's what we've started looking at for single exit for Anchorage specifically. The current building code limits you to 3 stories of up to 4 dwelling units per story with a single exit. If you go above that to a 4th story, or you have more than 4 units on a floor, you're going to have provide 2 exits. Those exits have to be separated half of the building's width apart. And so you end up with these long corridors down the middle of the building. And so in an apartment building, unlike a hotel, in an apartment building, you end up with one wall that can have windows. That means the bedrooms usually have to be on that side so that you can have egress in case of an emergency. And it really limits the design that you can have. And that long corridor and 2 staircases will limit the amount that can go to the residents in the building. We recognize those sort of constraints. And so that's why we've proposed moving to 6 stories. So now you could have 6-story structure with up to 4 dwelling units per floor and only have a single exit in the building. The benefit for that is now you'll have 2 sides of the building that you can have windows on. More of the floor area now goes back to the residents. And
Can I have the fire team come up for a minute?
come on, fire team.
What are the thoughts of the fire service on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian Dean, Fire Marshal. We actually worked in tandem with the Development Services team. I have a team of plan reviewers that made this proposal a lot more robust in the way the fire safety measures are. We recognize that reducing the number of exits is a significant change, so we wanted to make sure that the exiting provisions took priority in these changes. And so we made the stairways more robust, the construction standards for the stairways more robust. We made it to where these would only apply where we have adequate water sources, hydranted areas, and significantly better water flow. The sprinkler systems for these proposed structures are more robust. There's areas in the sprinkler code that allow exemptions. We actually remove those. For instance, if you have non-combustible construction on a balcony, you don't have to have a sprinkler head in there. We said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and have sprinkler heads on the balconies because of what people put on their balconies. We increase the robust performance of the fire alarm system. So it's an interconnected fire alarm system within unit addressable smoke detection. And the idea is that we want to ensure that the residents, one, have early notification and that they have immediate access to a robust exiting system. And then after that, the extinguishing features, the sprinkler system, would be able to significantly help in limiting the spread of the fire or actually extinguishing the fire. In addition, increase the widths of the stairways so that while people could be evacuating, you get more people evacuating at a time. You also have the ability to have firefighters climbing the stairs at the same time without hindering.
I have another question in the queue for you, I think, but I have a follow-up question, and that then comes back, I think, to you, Bob. And maybe the analysis has been done. Is the medicine more harmful than the cure? Meaning, is it going to cost so much more to increase the protective factors that it eliminates the value set from doing it?
Through the chair, Daniel can talk about some of the discussion at the national level. However, other jurisdictions have found that the cost benefit analysis is there to still support the projects going forward with this level of safety. So we believe that will be the same outcome here. This is primarily something for your smaller lots where you need to go vertical. If you have a huge area, it isn't the same concern, but it makes a lot more projects viable, particularly in the downtown or the more built up areas. And in those areas where you're starting with a higher value per square foot for the underlying dirt, we believe that it's cost effective to go in this means.
And at what point does the mandatory sprinkler system come into play? Is it 2 stories, 3 stories, 20 units? What is it that triggers that?
Through Mr. Chair, for this particular one, we're proposing sprinklers on any.
No, I understand that. For this, it's everywhere. My question is one step back from that. Generally, if you are looking at engineering a building, when do you have to move to, you must have a sprinkler system?
So in the International Building Code, so 4-plex or larger, the code requires sprinklers for all residential units. So if you're building a place where people are going to sleep, you are going to be putting sprinklers in.
If you have 4 units or more.
4 units or more.
Thank you.
Right. And to the point on postage stamp lots, yes, that's where that cities like Seattle have found this as a viable design. Developers there do it on lots that were previously undevelopable. It was not cost effective for them to put in 2 staircases for the size of the lot. So this gives them an avenue forward. It may end up being just as expensive as an alternative approval for the 2 staircase design, but that makes it viable in the end that they can build it and rent the units out where previously they weren't. This would not probably be a viable design on a massive lot where you have tons of space. You would end up wanting to put more units in.
Okay, Ms. Polly.
Thanks. So as this is increasing from 3 to 6 stories, is it, I guess, from an engineering or building code perspective, is it possible to build this out of wood, or are we talking concrete and steel at that point?
Currently, our provisions don't limit the type of construction. I will speak on, we are working with the state for our approval on this. This would be an alternative to what the state requires at the state level. And so we're seeking a request for modification where we say we're going to do something other than what's prescriptively allowed. And here's how we're meeting the safety intent of the code. And so we're still working on it with the state. One thing that they were considering was requiring type 1 or type 2 construction, which would be only non-combustible, so steel or concrete. And we're working with them to see if there's a way to get it to approve for all types. Most times when you go to 6 stories, there will be other limitations in place that may already require you to go to non-combustible. But our intent is not to limit that in this design or in this piece of the code.
Yeah, and I bring that up because I am reflecting on the fact that, you know, I've lived in places like Chicago where this type of building was the type of building, right? A 3-story walk up. And the secondary egress, if there was one, was the back deck that was bolted onto the, you know, the brick structure. But I do see the different, you know, wood is more flammable obviously than steel, but also building construction has really advanced in the last 100 years. I'm talking about buildings that were built in the 1910s that are still standing. So anyway, just to say, I think this is good. And I think there's a lot of reasons why, one, it used to be the case. And two, our technologies have changed such that fire risk is significantly lower. Obviously, we still need to think about fire risk, but especially if it's most likely to be built with non-wood construction, or as you said, non-combustible, then it seems like that even more makes these safer than they would have been 100 years ago. Thanks.
If I could just add one other thing that we haven't mentioned yet is that's the fact that we have an amazing fire department that can respond to 6-story buildings in this city with a great track record of fire response. And one of the reasons it's not applicable across the state is because there is no other jurisdiction that has the fire department that we have. In fact, I'll take this opportunity to let you know that as far as the ISO rating goes, fire has a rating of 1, which is very hard to get. So that also factored into our decision to pursue the single stair exit.
Yeah, just my ultimate question is the team behind it? Because I know sometimes when we're taking actions, the fire team, I think the sprinklers on the hillside conversation comes to mind where there was a difference. I just want to make sure we're aligned, and that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could just briefly, we are significantly aligned on this. When these proposals first came in, I tracked it as they're being legislated across the country. And with the prospect of that happening, we kind of went in early to try to make sure we get a product that works. And we did work hand in hand with the building department to craft things that we believe from the fire department perspective that were critical for life safety. And we're actually really pleased with the result we got.
About 15 minutes.
Thank you. Significant change in the Uniform Plumbing Code. For those that are interested, there is an international plumbing code we do not adopt. We adopt the Uniform Plumbing Code. That's adopted at the state level as well, and it's just better for our jurisdiction. So if you were curious why it's a UPC instead of an IPC, that's part of it. We've historically amended out the ability to do horizontal wet venting for bathroom groups, as well as circuit venting. These are just technical ways of routing your plumbing so that you get the proper venting for off-gassing. And we've thought in the past that horizontal wet venting and circuit venting were difficult to achieve. We found that they are not difficult to achieve and can be approved by our inspectors for residential projects for the horizontal venting, and then circuit venting would require review by one of our mechanical plumbing reviewers to get approval. But both of these are just more tools in the contractor's tool chest and the engineer's tool chest to address issues on technical projects where you may not be able to get a vent out of the building in a very tight condition. I see the horizontal wet venting is probably going to happen more on residential projects to address when you do a bathroom remodel and you're not able to get a vent straight up from where you put your new toilet. So this is a new way to get that through. This is a big relaxation from what was allowed previously. So we hope contractors are going to be excited for it. New ways to do stuff. A significant change from the National Electrical Code. Again, there is not an international electrical code. They tried it in 2006. No one bought it. So they went back and said, yeah, National Electrical Code, that's what we'll follow. So again, a little history. We've had a local amendment for parking spaces to require a duplex outlet. That's just a double plug outlet on the exterior for residential projects. That's for you to plug in your block heater for your car. It's seen as a big benefit. We've previously said with an exception for multifamily dwellings where you have an 8-plex or larger where indoor parking is provided, every indoor parking space can count for that outdoor plug. So you wouldn't have to put the outdoor plug in. We've amended that now. The change is that we're switching it to 9-plex or larger for the exception, but it is now going to be up to 50% of the exterior outlets can be removed on the project if you're a 9-plex or larger. So even if you don't have exterior parking, maybe not everyone is using a block heater, so it's not as high of a priority. So we won't mandate these, in a lot more of the cases for larger multifamily structures. And it will also be limited by the number of parking spaces that you provide. So if you only provide 4 parking spaces for your 9-plex, you'd only have to put it on those 4 parking spaces. You don't have to add more plugs other places. Since we don't have a parking minimum, we thought this would make sense to change it to this. We've also changed that plugs requirement to be a 10 gauge wire specifically. You'd usually use a smaller gauge wire. We've increased it because we've removed the requirement to put in a circuit for electric vehicle charging. So in the future, if a homeowner wanted to put one in, this is just a simpler way to do it. That 10 gauge wire can be used for that electric vehicle charging. So you could replace your duplex receptacle with EV charging station. Just a simpler way to get to the same end as making it easier for people to get an electric vehicle without mandating that they provide everything for an electric vehicle. Significant change to the International Energy Conservation Code is our building thermal envelope. It is considered a significant change just because we thought it was worth highlighting, but it is not a significant change in how we will do our enforcement of the code. Anchorage is climate zone 7. It's really cold here. Yet we've historically reduced our climate zone's thermal values, the R values that we use for insulation on our houses, to climate zone 4's standards, which would be like if we lived in Seattle. So climate zone 4 in Seattle, you could get by with a 2x6 wall construction and just fill it with batt insulation, and that will get you R21. That's all that we require in Anchorage, and we're not proposing to change that at this time. But the committee felt very strongly that we should be advocating for the higher standard, since we do have an energy crisis that we're dealing with, and electricity prices are going up and gas prices are going up. More energy efficient buildings would be preferable. And so we didn't want the only thing listed in the code to be the minimum that we can approve. We wanted people to be at least aware that they could do more to enhance the energy conservation of their building. So what we've done is provided the minimums, which match what we've done previously, and then provided a separate enhanced column. This is to say that we will approve you doing the R21 design, but what would be preferred, and if you're a concerned citizen for getting the most out of your house for energy conservation, you would want to do the R21 with an R5 continuous insulation layer on the exterior. This is just a tool to educate the public when someone's looking at the code, figuring out what they do. If they saw that the minimum was just the R21, they'd think that they're doing the highest energy standard that's required in Anchorage, right? And they are what's required, but they wouldn't know necessarily that they're not going to get what is best for their house. They're just going to get the minimum what's for their house, and we'll approve it, and we're okay with that. But we wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that there was a way to do more if you were able to do more. International Existing Building Code. This is for modifications to buildings. So if you have a house or a business and you want to do an addition, the existing building code comes into play. If you're doing alterations or modifications or a change of use to the use of the structure, you're going from a business to a restaurant, this code is what comes into play. We did not make many significant changes in here, but one was to our additional permit requirements for re-roofs. In 2018, we had a policy that we used for re-roofs on what we required for your submittal, and we rolled that into our 2018 code cycle. A subsequent AO modified it. What we wanted was to say that if you have a really thin insulation on your roof, that's usually not going to hold a lot of snow, right? And it will melt and slough off, go away. That was fine. When you come back in and you want to have an energy conserving building and you say that we only have 2 inches, we're going to go to 12 inches, you're increasing the R value on your roof, which means it'll hold more snow. So this is part of the code that we have amended to say that if you are going to increase it too much, we need you to verify that your roof can support the full design snow load that's required in Anchorage. A lot of buildings built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and probably early 90s were not designed necessarily for a full 40 pound per square foot snow load. They may have been designed for 20 with the expectation that snow would melt. So when you increase the R value on your roof, it's not going to melt as often. The amendment that came in later said that this was only going to be required for buildings from 1970 and earlier. If you were built in 1971, you'd be exempt from this requirement, no matter how much installation you increased on your roof. What's happened in that time is we've had complaints from several people that they had a re-roof done and now their roof is sagging. And part of that's because it was built after 1970. They weren't required to check if the roof could support 40 pounds per square foot. So we've told them that there's nothing that we can do because the code required that we only apply this before 1970. So they should work with their contractor or a new contractor to try and see what they can do to retrofit their roofs at this point. The code committee felt strongly that we shouldn't put a year limit on this. If you have a very thin insulation and you increase it, you're going to increase the amount of snow that your roof can support. And so we think it should be checked. We're not requiring the modifications. We just want to make sure that the roof can support the snow load.
So this raises the question of, since we had all of those roof collapses in the last couple of years with the heavy snow of 23, 24 in particular, were there any changes sought that would kind of improve on that circumstance? I know that those were all kind of time-specific construction practices that aren't generally still in the practice of construction, but was there anything added to this because of that?
Yes. I didn't include it in this slideshow because I thought it was too technical, but it is a great one to highlight. It was a long debate that we had. What we found was the issue mainly focused on pre-engineered wood trusses, which use metal plates to connect them. The industry has told us that there are not issues with the plates pulling out on the trusses due to different weather conditions. But what they have not done is research to back that up. So what we did at the structural code committee meetings was determine a way that we could increase the size of the plates based on the strength that was required. We require them to increase it over that by 20%, basically, so that the plate is oversized, so that if they do pull out to some extent, there is additional capacity already built into the system. There is not a requirement to do that, and so the way that we've done it is there's a specific factor that gets applied that they get to select based on the fabrication tolerance. We mandate that if you have a span over 30 feet, which is where we start to see these failures occur, that they include this 20% increase on all their plate connections.
So on projects of scale, then it is a requirement, but generally it's a recommendation.
It's required over 30 feet.
Yeah, for projects of scale.
Yes. But under that, we haven't seen failures occurring. At residential projects, we haven't seen the failures occurring. So it's been these large, long span commercial warehouse spaces that have seen that issue.
Right. Thank you. I'm glad you addressed it.
Yeah. Our next significant change is to the American Society of Mechanical Engineers A17.1, which is elevators. I wish they had a catchier name, but they are just elevators. They went through the code cycle and proposed modifying this section of code for the location of machinery spaces and control spaces. What we have are elevators that are machine roomless elevators. That's an MRL. Old elevators have a large machine room right off to the side or on top in a penthouse. And this is an MRL, so there's no machine room required. They put it on top of the cab, basically. But that didn't address where the control space would be. The control space is all of the electrical panels and different elements that get used that are not a part of the motor. Those they put inside the elevator shaft in the wall. Now, this very often ends up being on the same wall as the door. So when you open the door, it will block the control panel. So then you have to close yourself into the elevator shaft to do the work. There's a lot of risk associated with that. If you have an incident, if you get shocked, If you have a health condition, you could end up passing out or getting injured in there, and no one will know where you're at. We felt that that was an unsafe condition. No one's going to be able to get access to you because they shut down the elevator while you're doing this, so they can't even open the door typically. So our solution was, hey, the control space should be accessible from the outside of the elevator. It should not be only accessed from inside the hoistway. What can also happen is if the elevator is in bad condition, is the elevator will be at the bottom of the shaft and the control space is actually on the 3rd or 4th floor of the shaft. So now you have to get chains to drag the elevator up to the position and lock it in place so you can even get in to try and address any of these issues. There's also a lot of fire safety conditions that need to be addressed with this. If there's a malfunction in the panel and you end up with a bunch of smoke or fire coming out of the control space, no one can get to it until you get your elevator person out there to address it. You may not be aware of this happening, right? If it is accessed from the exterior, it's more likely that you'll have somebody to address it earlier. So our proposal was the simplest solution, which is they'll just turn the panel around and face it to the exterior. That can be hidden inside of a closet or behind a painting, or it can just be an electrical panel box that gets locked, right? There's a lot of ways that this can be addressed. You'll see in the middle of this, there is what New York does, since they have also mandated the same thing, is they just put a small little closet in. And when you need to access it, the building maintenance has the keys to it and you can get in there and do the work that you need to do. No one has to climb into the shaft. No one has to put themselves at risk just to maintain these elevators. I will mention that this does have the support of the International Union of Elevator Constructors, Local 19. That is our union for the Northwest region. They're very supportive of this amendment going into place. They recognize that there's a risk associated with working on these control panels, and on MRLs, the control panel has a useful life, we'll say, of around 10 years anyway. So you're going to be in there when things break down more often than you would on other types of elevators.
I'll add a little philosophical element and a connection to the fire department. You should download Pulse Point, which is the app that signals if somebody is in cardiac arrest, but it also functions as a scanner for our fire department. And you will be surprised at how frequently elevators break down in this town. It's almost daily. So kind of scary. Ms. Brawley.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm wondering, obviously this is for new builds. How does this interact with, a lot of our office buildings downtown, for example, were built in the 80s. So what happens with a building that's already existing? And let's say it's not doing change of use and it's still just functioning the way it's been functioning.
I believe no change is going to be required by this immediately. If you end up doing, I can't remember what the elevator term is, but it's a major renovation on the elevator itself, that could trigger the turning the panel around requirement. But this does not require any upgrades right now, not until you do something.
Yeah, so really if it's significant enough that if they have to replace it or rebuild it or whatever, then they would have to do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we are pretty much out of time. How far along are you? Do you have a bunch more?
I've got 2 slides left. I'll run through
Just can forbear. It's fine. Yep.
Thank you. Our next one is on dwelling unit separation in the International Residential Code. Every dwelling is its own piece. And what you want to do is have a fire separation wall between those pieces. So if you have a fire on one side and the family's on the other and they're not aware that there's a fire, they're protected. It's a 1-hour fire separation. You're expected to get 1 hour of useful life out of it to give you a chance to get out. The Residential Code 2024 added an appendix that the Code Committee was interested in adopting, and it would be an exception to this rule to put in fire separation. The exception would be that you have to interconnect the smoke alarms between the 2 units, so that if one unit does have a fire condition, the smoke alarms will go off and it'll notify both sides. Current code restricts you from interconnecting them across units. One of the reasons is if your neighbor is a bad cook, that you will always hear their alarm go off. And are you more likely to remove that smoke detector because of it? Yes. And so this is a solution that they've proposed while there are still reservations about the solution. One thing that is a problem is when you go to do this renovation on a house to add an accessory dwelling unit, or just make it into a duplex where it was a single family before, is the fire separation requirement can be restrictive. It can be difficult to put in. And so this was the code's attempt to find a way to do that. The final change is the AHBA was very hot and heavy to get to remove the requirement to have preservative treated lumber for exterior decks. It is an issue for them sometimes where they go to do a project and you have to special order a 15-inch deep glulam beam and get it pressure treated. We only keep 12-inch and under as preservative treated in Anchorage. And so if you end up special ordering it and it's delayed, they end up sending the wrong piece. You accidentally put it in the wrong building. You don't have the piece that you need. And so they asked for a way to not have to preservative treat the wood. What they ultimately came up with was that the code requires you to protect all lumber that's exposed to the elements. The protection in this case that they came up with was that you would paint or stain the beam. You would put ice and water shield on top of the beam, and then you would metal flash the top of that as well. It's important to point out that previously we did require paint or stain on the beams if you weren't going to preservative treat them back in the 80s. A lot of those have failed because maintenance is important on that paint, and they were not maintained because people expect their decks to be okay for the exterior. So we're hoping that by providing the ice and water shield and the flashing, this will be an approved version of what was done in the 80s. And that is the end of significant changes.
Okay, any questions for members? Anna?
Yeah, I think, I know we don't have a lot of time. I imagine we're going to hear from some folks about some of the things that were not included. So I just wonder if you have any that you would like to flag that were, issues that were discussed and ultimately you all opted not to make those changes. And that could also be a follow-up in writing if it's a bunch of technical things. And I say that because I just know we are going to get some questions and pitched some amendments. So just wanting to understand with a heads up what those might be.
And I think it's probably better to do that by email. Just send out a note. These are the general big picture. These are the areas we talked about but decided we couldn't get there.
Yeah.
That we might, that you might anticipate we're going to hear from stakeholders trying to push us to act.
Mr. I will add, because you may hear about some issues, but that were not included, but a lot of those were not included because they did not go through committee. They were, last minute proposals. Whereas, for instance, the untreated glulam, which we pushed back against for decades, I believe.
I've heard it before.
The reason that is now in the code is because the HBA went about it the right way, got it into the committee. It was debated by the experts, and now it's in. So,
Right. And so her question, Ms. Barley's question is like, what didn't get into that category, and what should we be thinking about? That what are the Rumsfeldian known unknowns? Like, help us understand that by email.
Okay.
At a time. Yeah. The unknown knowns or the known unknowns, all of that. Like, it's a good question. It could help us get this thing passed if we are able to anticipate what curveballs are coming. So.
And I have a terrible imagination, so I hope I can think of what the known unknowns may be. I will try to look back and see.
Yeah, I think Bob can help you kind of tune into what the political arguments are going to be.
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay, if I don't hear anything else, we'll go ahead and be adjourned. We'll be done for the weekend, and no meeting next week. I think we have some work sessions committees, but anyhow, thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.